This interview is sponsored by My Patriot Supply. When emergencies strike, you always see news stories of long lines of people and empty store shelves. There's no need to be a part of that chaos and the possibility of having to deal with FEMA food lines. Those that know what's coming are using today to prepare. You should make a plan too. I have, starting with building an emergency food supply, and I trust and use My Patriot Supply. They're experts in emergency preparedness and have guaranteed 2-day delivery. Disasters won't wait. Why should you? Act now and save $70 on a 2-week emergency food kit when you go to my special website, preparewithx22.com. My Patriot Supply food kits last up to 25 years in storage and include breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. Order a few today and receive guaranteed 2-day delivery discreetly to your door. Take action so you're ready for what's coming and save $70. It's better to have and not need than need and not have. Go to preparewithx22.com. Click the link below. Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest, Jim Willie. Jim is the editor of the Hat Trick Letter. You can find it on www.goldenjackass.com. Check out his newsletter. He's highly considered one of the leading experts on central bank policy, global U.S. dollar rejection, and the gold and silver market. He is also highly regarded for forecasts on currency-related collapses, bank defaults. He's on top of the gold market, and I am very happy and honored to have Jim Willie back on the X22 Report Spotlight. Jim, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Oh, gosh, it's been, like 3 months. We were on in July, and I keep saying it. So much has happened. Since then, we've basically seen the bond market kind of blow up, but not get full recognition. The repo has gone out of control, and they're doing their dead level best, Dave, to prevent it from becoming permanent overnight market, POMO, permanent overnight market operations. And now it's just repo, which is repurchase. Repurchases are very temporary, but they're stopping the bleeding. And, a month and a half ago, it was 20, 30 billion a day. And then about a month ago, it became 40 billion a night. I meant night, not day. 40 billion overnight. And then it just blossomed up to 80 billion. And now it's continuing upward. It's over 200 billion a night. And I ask a basic question. If we get to $500 billion per day, per night, will we be able to conclude that we're in a Weimar-type crisis? Or do we have to wait for it to be $1 trillion per day? But the big unspoken question is, who needs all this money?
Where's it going?
Who needs the aid? Who needs the emergency action in an overnight dispensation of 200 billion, which 3 weeks ago was 100 billion a night. Now, when we get to January, will it be 380 billion a night or maybe 410 billion a night and still climbing? When do we call it a crisis? Well, all the people that I hear about on financial news networks claim that things are moving along kind of well. Yeah, I mean, golly, they're starting to seem like morons. And what I'm hoping happens is that we get a bit of a competition between the news networks, whether they're financial or political or economic or just societal news. I'm hoping we get a competition where they start calling each other liars, where one side is telling pretty much the truth, the other side is telling pretty much a deep, ugly lie. That all is well, that, Trump is trying to ruin the nation, that impeachment is deserved because he didn't file taxes when the others who are running the impeachment process are involved with high treason and Ukraine reconstruction fund thefts. Golly, unbelievable. Anyway, I want to see a competition, but the big question right now, the burning question with respect to the repo being converted to POMO, the permanent operation. Who needs all the money? Who's in trouble? What's going on?
So where is it all going? Is it just going into the banks?
I don't think it's like 50 or 80 banks. I know that the banking system is vulnerable. I tend to believe that we've got a dozen sci-fi banks. It's not science fiction. I mean, I love that. I just love that. We're talking about SIFI banks. A term was coined several years ago. It means systemically important financial institutions. Let me translate that for you, or interpret it better for you. If a bank is a sci-fi bank, then everything will be done to prevent its failure because it could take down the entire banking system due to the interlinks going on and the shared derivative load. Okay, so I think we've got a few banks that are on death's doorstep, that are, being hung out on the 80th floor and hanging by tenterhooks and strings and jock straps. I mean, golly, this is really, really serious stuff. I've got some news for you, and
Okay.
it's from good sources. Let me describe one particular story about the vulnerability of Credit Suisse, and let me give credit where it's due. I had a conversation with Dave Morgan, the silver guru, and he asked me, the innocent kind of question, the collegial kind of question. I'm hearing this, Jim. What are you hearing? Anything in confirmation? You have any more individual data nuggets that might fit this? Anything being cited directly that might fit this? Okay, just looking for the handshake. And I didn't have anything, but here's what he said, that there was a keynote speaker that he had conversation with, and he didn't identify the person because he doesn't want to be known. And this person said to Dave Morgan that Credit Suisse of Switzerland, they got two giant banks here, Credit Suisse and UBS. Credit Suisse, let's call them CS, I'll call them both, but Credit Suisse was in very, very big trouble. And as this fellow put it, they had major challenges in unwinding their giant positions. And there's really not much more that was shared. CS in Switzerland is in big, big trouble. So I did my little brainstorming with Dave. We went back and forth, and I went with a couple of my jackass colleagues looking for information. We went back and forth. One or two of us went back and forth. And here we can only try to piece this together because you can't, dial up a Google search or another search and say Credit Suisse, unwinding problem, financial failure. You'll get nothing. This is all being handled quietly, which brings up a different point in a minute, because I think these are basically bankruptcies in progress kept secret. When a sci-fi bank, a systemically important bank, a giant, big structural bank in the system, goes into failure, enters failure, the last thing they will want to do is to tell you about it, because it could cause an entire contagion and bank runs and a sequence of failures that gets totally out of control. So here's how I interpret. Go back to 2012, and the Swiss franc got in trouble from rising too much. They're not part of the euro monetary system. In other words, they don't share the euro. They have the Swiss franc. And there was a lot of money that got scared and didn't want to remain within the EU, so it hopped the fence and went to Switzerland, which caused Switzerland a big problem. Now, Switzerland, many Americans may not know, they've got a rather diverse economy. They've got an export economy. It's not just, clocks and chocolate. I mean, I hate that joke, but that's the impression of a lot of people. They've got a pharmaceutical industry. They've got I can't really cite 5 or 6 off the top of my head. I once saw a list of it, and it's a diverse list of export industries. Okay, so they had like a 20-25% increase in the Swiss franc, and they got themselves into trouble, and they put their economy at risk. So the central bank said, we're going to maintain a 120 peg with the euro. In other words, the Swiss franc will be worth 120 euros. Okay, and that was, ballyhooed as a successful project that kept things in order. It prevented the Swiss economy from erupting. into a giant mess. Fast forward a few years to about 2000, I think it was 2017 or so, where the Swiss got caught and they were revealed as having the Euro-Swiss peg being four-sided. Word got out and evidence came out and data was revealed that there was a massive dollar swap facility that was tapped by the Swiss. They increased on a gigantic scale their U.S. stock portfolio, and it invited investigation, invited questions and queries, and the result was they admitted that they had been using the dollar swap facility to load up on U.S. dollar-based assets, and in the process, they helped to push down the gold price from 1900. If you go back and look at your recent history of this decade, you'll see that the Swiss euro peg was put in place right at the point where the gold price hit $1,900. So they basically admitted that it wasn't just a Swiss euro peg, it was a Swiss euro gold dollar four-way arbitrage that helped push the gold price down from $1,900 to the $1,300 range. We're talking about, like a 30% dive.
So this is how they manipulated the gold market.
It was primarily the Swiss. Now, this begs other questions. Did the Swiss do it alone or did they get some help? I'm thinking they got help from both Deutsche Bank, which is the super bicep in Europe, and they got help from JP Morgan, which is the super bicep in the United States. So my firm conviction is that the four-way arbitrage done by the Swiss helped push down the gold price significantly, enable treasury bond rallies, but now the unwind is next to impossible because it's too big, too broad, too deep, and too many years. So my guess, no, I don't like the word guess. My dedicated conjecture based on the facts and assimilating all the factors is that JP Morgan is in very big trouble with their treasury bond versus gold arbitrage, while Deutsche Bank is in very big trouble with their euro versus gold arbitrage, and the Swiss are in very big trouble with their unwind of the euro versus the Swiss, and maybe a good deal of gold in there as well. And all the above are in trouble with the dollar versus crude oil. Because the first big derivative to be dismantled and taken apart was the petrodollar, which is oil versus the major currencies, dollar, euro, pound, not so much the Swiss. So I think we got a big unwind problem from the four-way arbitrage that involved gold. Now, in the last 3 or 4 months, we saw gold make a good move.
Right.
And now we hear that Credit Suisse is in trouble. Okay, well, if they were in trouble from crude oil, we would have heard about it a year ago. That's my thinking. If they were in trouble with just the dollar rising, then I think it would show up in different ways. But I think the Swiss are in trouble with gold. I think Credit Suisse has a lot of short gold contracts, and with gold having moved up, a couple $100, roughly speaking, since May, June, I think the Swiss are in trouble. I think JP Morgan's in trouble. I think Deutsche Bank's in trouble. And this brings up something very important. I mentioned my theory that the SIFI banks, if and when they go into failure mode, we're not going to be told about it. It's going to be secret because they don't want bank runs. They don't want contagion. They don't want all those ugly effects. But there's something else that's very important. And I think we're going to see numerous banks fail. And numerous banks see extreme distress. And I think that the really big issue is, can they keep it all secret? Now, it's a nice thing to say, oh, they're going to keep this quiet. I don't know that it's possible. They might say, go ahead.
Which bank is in in a lot of trouble right now? Which is the main bank?
I think it's Deutsche Bank, but I think also Credit Suisse and JP Morgan.
Because we're hearing reports out in Germany that they're, in a recession. Their manufacturing is taking a dive. Now you're telling us that Deutsche Bank is in trouble. What does this mean for the EU? What does this mean for the derivative market if Deutsche Bank is in trouble?
Well, there was a report that came out, I think it was from Basel, the Bank for International Settlements, which is often just called Basel. When they issue rules, they're called the Basel rules. It was either Basel or IMF, and they're kind of like a dog and pony show together. But the point was that many, they didn't say one or two or a few, they said a great many Western banks are at risk of failure if we enter a serious recession. And I ask, where have you been the last 12 or 13 years? We've been in a recession on a constant basis in the United States since 2006. In fact, John Williams of Shadow Government Statistics had a quote recently that since the spring quarter of 2005, there have only been 2 positive GDP quarters. He's saying 13 plus years with 52 quarters, we've had only 2 positive. That's what I call a chronic vicious recession. So if the IMF / Basel gangsters claim that some banks might not survive given a recession, then I think what they're saying between their teeth is that they're at risk of failing here and now. And we're starting to get reports, and I don't think it's going to be possible to keep it secret, Dave. Look at the repo volume. Questions are coming up. Who's drawing on $200 billion a night now? It was half that less than a month ago. When I posted the report, it was around the 23rd or 4th of October. There was a single night where it zipped up to 140 billion. I had a graph that showed 40, then 80, 140. I mean, and it just sticks out like a thumb. Well, now the new graph, it just goes up, and it's like 200 something, 240, 250. You can't hide this. I mean, we have the phrase, you got the elephant in the room, you can't hide it, you can put a drape over it, but something's under there.
Right.
Well, this is like a fire in the mansion. And the smoke is going from room to room, and you can't hide it. You smell smoke before you see it. And then you see the smoke before you see the fire. And then you see the fire before the various platforms collapse. So the last 3 months I've been talking about the bond crisis, the dollar rejection. Now what we're starting to see is the beginning of the bank failures that I previewed. I think it's Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, and JP Morgan, but I got an honorable mention list also. There are 3 banks, and I like to write them down so I don't keep, I can refer to it later. I'm hearing a lot of buzz that Citigroup is in trouble. Citibank. And I try to ask questions, well, what is it about their derivatives? Because we're not talking about commercial loan portfolio, because they don't much have any. They've got a derivative portfolio that is 1,000 times larger than their credit portfolio. So if you're looking for a failure moment, you look at the derivative book. And you can only, surmise that maybe it's a petrodollar, dollar versus oil and oil versus euro, that whole triangle, etc. Maybe it's treasury bond derivatives that have gone bad. I don't know. We have to guess. But I think Citigroup's in trouble. I'm just hearing too many. I've gotten, in the last 8-10 months, I've probably gotten about, 6 or 8 individual informed reports with just little nuggets, not much, nuggets to tell me that Citigroup's in trouble. Okay, then we had the May-June incident with Wells Fargo, where the Department of Treasury descended upon the bank with 30 different agents to gather data. I think to gather and remove the data. This is all part of the sci-fi bank kept secret. Remove the data so some junior level bank officer doesn't find his way into it, read it, grab a few manila folders or discs, CD-ROMs, and go talking to a reporter. Okay, and then you had all the different bank accounts that didn't show up, deposits, and ATM machines that didn't work, and then suddenly 3 days later, everything's fine, except there are a handful of missing accounts. And maybe they're recovered later. I got a theory about Wells Fargo. I've shared it before. I don't know if I shared it on your show, but it is the favorite Chinese bank. Chinese deposit treasury bills, treasury bonds, and they borrow money, and then they go out shopping for U.S. urban commercial property.
So are these banks so bad that, are you saying that these banks, if something should happen, they'll cease to exist?
Well, it goes to the old point that I've been making. If they're sci-fi banks, then you're going to get extraordinary measures overnight, all weekend long, to patch them up, to fill them up with gifts from the Department of Treasury and the Fed. There'll be suddenly Wall Street banks, helping them out. There'll be maybe some British banks helping them out, and they don't fail. They're just zombies. We don't have bank failures anymore. We have zombification. We have the creation of zombie banks. And how do you qualify a zombie bank? Well, they're insolvent, but they're in operation. And then you have to ask, well, where are they getting their funds? Where are they getting the liquidity supply? Oh, it's funny money from the Fed. So these are like intravenous intensive care ward banks, flat on their back, getting IV blood from the central bank, and they can't effing walk.
So do you
I got a third one. Societe Generale in France. They got, kind of messed up dealing with Deutsche Bank to take all their ETFs. And, I kind of laugh at this because they say, well, all these ETFs from Deutsche Bank, they tried to discharge them. SocGen took them, but we're talking about $15 billion worth of accounts, and they might all go up in smoke. Synthetic ETFs, exchange traded funds, managed by Deutsche Bank, and they don't want it anymore because they're entering a bank failure, because they're liquidating their assets during a hidden, secretive bank failure. They're in bankruptcy. They're doing a restructuring. And The Voice made a joke 2 or 3 years ago. He said, Deutsche Bank's going to go to 50 cents. It'll take a long time. But Jim, take a close look at their 7 or 8 businesses, and not one of them is profitable. They're all in ruins. So when you do a restructure of a dead bank, all of whose business segments are in the red, there's nothing to save.
Jim, do you think this is all happening because when you look around the world and you look at what's been happening, especially like in Syria, Libya, Lebanon, where everything was based on the petrodollar, and all these wars, all these endless wars, they're all coming to an end. Troops are being withdrawn from these areas. There's riots, protests saying that we don't like these puppet leaders in power. Is the globalist system now being ripped apart, and the petrodollar system being ripped apart, and the whole system is just coming down now?
It's starting to look that way, but I don't want to be one who calls for revolution. I'm only one who observes the breakdown. Remember the old point that I've been making for 2 years now. 90% of the middle level banker cabal has been eliminated. They've been stripped of wealth. They've been flipped to cooperate, or they've been killed off. Well, that means that their puppet leaders are more vulnerable and they don't have the supporting mechanism. The way I look at it is, just think of a guy like Macron in France, Emmanuel Macron. Okay, Macron, whatever. He needs 15 legs to stand up. And maybe he only has 4, 5, or 6 right now. So he's smelling what's going on. He's seeing what's happening. He's noticing he doesn't have the legs anymore. So he's cutting deals with Putin and Russia. I think the Macron story is one of the most interesting in the last 2 or 3 years. He was put in place by the banker cabal, And in the last year or so, he hasn't done a damn thing to please them. Okay, now you've got, Evo Morales. Oh gosh, I think he's in Peru. Oh gosh, I hope I hope I'm right. I get Ecuador, Peru, and Chile a little bit confused. And let's just say, from one of the Andes nations, Evo Morales declared himself president for life and had an election to rubber stamp that move. And now he's seeking asylum in a foreign country. I can't remember which one it is. I cannot. I read
He's
it
from Bolivia, right? That was the
Bolivia, right?
Yeah,
right. Okay. In the end, I got that right. He's from the Andes. I don't want to seem ignorant or, paint them all with one brush. They're all very different nations. Chile is a copper-rich nation. They also produce a lot of silver. Bolivia has a number of different metals that they produce, but they got a lot of desert region. Ecuador is dollar-based in their economy and banking system, and they have a lot of pressure to maintain the course with the dollar. So there's tremendous pressure by our nasty boys to, keep them on a leash. But Morales, he's seeking asylum now. I can't remember where he sought the asylum. Maybe it's Argentina. I don't want to be wrong. But yeah, you look at they're starting to call them now the justice revolutions. We used to have the color revolution. Well, the backlash is the justice revolutions, where the popular uprisings are against the banker cabal and their puppets and all the laws that are really trying to install, enforce, and implement fascist rules, cut down on liberties and rights, and the people are objecting.
So do you think this is the end of the globalist elite regime? I mean, look at the UK, look at the riots, and you mentioned Macron, look at the riots in France, and look at the Middle East. I mean, everything is coming to a head, and the U.S. is backing out of the Middle East right now. Everything the deep state has done over the years, it's being reversed now. And actually, Trump even said the globalist system does not have a future anymore in this new economic future that we're creating.
Yeah, it's exciting, but it's also dangerous. I mean, it reminds me of the Chinese symbol, where danger and opportunity, I think, are the same symbol. It's not like we're withdrawing and maintaining zero presence. Our boys have threatened Assad in Syria that if they try to extract their own oil, they'll be shot. Oh, you mean we're commander-in-chief of Syria now? Let me back up on something I'm reminded. Remember back years ago, there were the UBS and Credit Suisse money laundering cases and Iran sanction violation cases. And back then I was making the case, well, what jurisdiction does the United States have over Swiss banks? Well, I can tell you, Credit Suisse is a U.S. registered bank. I forgot that point. They're a U.S. registered bank, and therefore they have direct access to the Fed window. They're pretty much the same status as J.P. Morgan at the window. In other words, almost unlimited volume to patch over their problem. Okay, now back to the justice revolutions. There was one writer, and I quote him, and it was a list of about 15 nations that are having justice riots. I don't want to advocate riot or revolution. I want peaceful reform, but you got to admit, these banker cabal henchmen, captains, and generals, they don't go quietly into the night. Pardon me. They don't go quietly into the night, and they don't sign off reforms for popular remedies to make things fair and equitable. That's not their style. They'll try to bribe someone. They'll try to murder someone. They'll kill someone on a plane. Doesn't matter about. In fact, they kind of like killing on planes because the more collateral deaths that there are, the more the public thinks, well, that's not a directed hit. Look at all those individuals, innocent people who died. That's the kind of moronic thinking that is so prevalent in our country. No, when Ron Brown, the Commerce Secretary, was killed in Yugoslavia during the Clinton administration because he was about to testify before Congress about Clinton campaign fund pilferage, They took out 20 executives, including an AT&T executive on the same plane. They altered the beacon, so it crashed into a hillside, thinking it was landing on an airstrip. The more collateral deaths that there are, the more the public thinks that's not a hit. I don't have a whole lot of respect for the public mindset. I've said frequently that 10% of Americans are aware of what's going on, but only 10% of that 10% are willing to do anything about it. So you really have only 1% who are aware and take action. And you got 9% who are aware and kind of watch what's going on with popcorn and awe and fear, wondering about their inheritance, wondering about their mutual funds, but not really willing to take a big gold hedge position. So, we're in a weird world, and now it's gotten so much more complicated in the United States with all the socialist fools out there. I'm undergoing an interesting, provoked debate with a very smart buddy of mine from college. And I don't want to give away anything more about his identity or his affiliations, but he's making the case for the Trump impeachment. He's making the case for, continued socialist programs. And I'm calling him on his inability to distinguish between public service programs like electricity and water networks that I actively promote and find good. He's saying, well, Jim, plowing the roads from snow with all those trucks, that's a socialist positive. I said, no, it's a public service, you dummy. Hey. Clearing the roads does not favor one income group over another, because even the poor have cars. They just might be repossessed. I get so tired of the diminishing of the U.S. intellectual capacity. And you can read other articles and other theories. And I just read something very good over the weekend. Where's all this stupidity coming from? A lot of it's coming from universities, where they're advocates of rights. And my gosh, I heard something at Halloween. That's a gender offensive costume that you have.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Go take a lunch break, you idiot. I'm tired of all of this. We don't have any gender neutral bullshit in Costa Rica. We just have basic fraud. Basic popular fraud. I got into a conversation last night. I was ordering a dinner from a nice fellow, and they had a very nice, menu. I'll pick some of that, and some of that, some of that, some of that, and you get a plate. And you pay like $4, and you walk away. And he said something to me like, "Do you enjoy living in Costa Rica?" And in Spanish, and I said, "Well, yeah, I enjoy a lot of different things, but the fraud is pretty hard to tolerate. No me aguanta. No me aguanto." And he said, "What do you mean, the fraud?" And I said, "Well, immigration office with their extortion. And, the bad construction just goes hand in hand with the fraud, but contractor fraud." And he said, "Did this happen to you?" And I said, "Yeah, and about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 examples." He said, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Por Dios, por Dios." And I said, "You want to hear more?" And he said, "Yeah." And I got a tray of food and I need to eat. I'm hungry. But I spent 5 minutes talking to him, a nice fellow, no English. And I explained, had a nice deal with a condominium, pre-construction, but lost the good price from double water contractor fraud. In other words, water contractor fraud followed by a different water contractor fraud. I said I had, title fraud for a property and, trying to sell it now, but it cost a fortune just to clean up, and now sell for a loss, sell for a discount in a bad market, lost money there. Roof caved in on another property, faulty construction. A crime scene from a car parts business with 3 or 4 very nice looking stores, but no idea what's going on with the fraud in the warehouses. So I've lost a lot of money. And he said, "Oh, that's very unfortunate. Que desafortunado." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You're going to stay here?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I'm going to stay here. I just need some help. That's why I set up the donate button." on my website, and I've got a description of what it's all about and some of the examples of the losses. And they seem to have changed a bit. As I mentioned to you earlier before we got recording, I'm still doing cleanup. I mean, one cleanup from fraud has taken close to 2 years.
Wow.
It's amazing. People, well-meaning friends say, Jim, why don't you just get rid of them? And I said, what the hell do you think I'm doing? It costs a lot of money to clean it up. I can't just sell something that's just riddled with fraud. I've got to have paperwork on the 3 elements of the fraud. It costs money. I need to save money. Then I lose the money, hire a lawyer, hire a different lawyer, and I'm out like $30,000. I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. And these guys continue plying their fraudulent trade. Contractors billing for a different project, not just yours. That hasn't happened to me, but it happened to 3 different friends. Lawyers who take money to do a residence application and don't do a damn thing. And I got to do it all over again 2 or 3 years later, an extra cost. Now, I'm suffering badly here. We had you gave me an opportunity back in July, and I'm very grateful for all the people who have responded, and they've helped me. As I put it now, I'm working out of a hole, and now I'm about to start the process of just paying off the debts and getting healthy. I have not paid off all the debts because new ones have come and additional costs from existing fraudulent situations to clean them up. It's very, very painful, and it's disheartening, and it knocks me down. There are days where I'm actually in bed for 2 hours in the afternoon, just lying down, trying to stay calm, because the previous days have had some losses and a unexpected continuation of losses, taking a different turn. Now they're not. The newest losses in the last 3 or 4 months have not been from fraud. They've been from medical costs and other things, and they're painful. One is an accounting cost, and just a lot of different things. But I still got some costs from cleanup. Another $5,000 for that damn septic tank that blew up the same week that a car crash killed a client owing a bunch of money. I'm telling you, I'm really overwhelmed, Dave, and it's continuing, but it's changing. It's improving a little bit, but it's just changing.
I hope things get better, Jim. I really do. I wanted to ask you this question about the Dutch Central Bank. I don't know if you heard about it.
Sure.
Where they said that everyone should have gold, and then they started to move some of their gold into military bases. I wanted to get your take on that, and why do you think that message came out?
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up, because I have 6 or 8 stories that we haven't touched on. That was one of them. First of all, you got to ask the question, why did the Dutch make this statement, and who permitted them to make the statement? Why did that statement get out? Forget what they said, but focus on why did that official at the Dutch National Bank, the DNB, why did that official have permission to talk? That's a big question.
That is a big question.
And my answer is this: 90% of the middle level of the banker cabal players have been flipped, stripped, or killed.
Wait, what are you saying? Say that again.
Remember, the middle level of the banker cabal has been largely eliminated.
Okay, by who?
So the very people who would have told that DNB Dutch official, shut up, you're not going on the air with that, you're not going public with that, we're not going to permit you to print that, go back to your office and shut up, that person is gone.
Who eliminated them?
Okay, this is tough. The ones who flipped were done from the Serious Fraud Division of Interpol. The ones who were stripped of their wealth, that was done by a combination of the same group plus their own government officials like the FBI in the United States, Scotland Yard in England, and I don't know in the member nations of Europe. The individual national police got someone by the short hairs and said, look, you're going to the big house. You're going away to prison for like 30, 40 years unless you cooperate with us, in which case we'll let you keep 70% of your wealth. but you're going to have to forfeit, 28 or 128 billion. So Interpol, national police agencies, but the killing, I asked The Voice, I understand the flipping and the stripping, but who did the killing? I said, it was not the Vatican, was it? He said, no. The Vatican killed the good guys. The Vatican are professional killers. They'll kill a JP Morgan banker who wants to go public about bank fraud. The Vatican works closely with the mafia in doing their very clean professional murder hits. I said, okay, well, who would do the hits of the cabal? Who would hit the bad guys? He said, the triad of Hong Kong was hired by the White Dragons to do precisely that. Okay, so my theory, back to the Dutch, is this Dutch official didn't have any obstacles because so many middle-level banker cabal officials, I call them the captains and the majors, they're no longer around. They're not providing the obstruction. They're not issuing the warning. They're not dropping by the guy's office. They're not making a phone call at 10 p.m. that night at his home. So he's free to make the comment. The second big question that I have, besides why was it permitted, was who was actually talking when the Dutch official's mouth was moving?
Jim, let me just ask you this.
No, let me answer the question, Dave.
Go ahead.
The Germans. The Germans are sick and tired of this shit. The Germans are radical in their opposition of the Euro Central Bank. Radical. And they keep it quiet. So I think they use their Dutch mouthpiece. Okay.
I mean, you're saying there's a hit on these central bankers. Is this to remove the central banking system all the way up to the Rothschilds?
Yeah. Now, I'm not saying they're hits of central bankers. I'm saying they're hits of like officers. Okay, like at the Fed. Okay, how many different supporting roles are there to the Fed chairman? What, you got 12 regional governors?
Right.
And the most powerful is the New York Fed? I think the most powerful of the whole group, including the head, is the New York Fed. I think the New York Fed runs the entire show, and they permit a new chairman to be like a spokesman, and the person who does the fundraising and the person who goes to Congress for testimony, like Janet Yellen. I don't think she was in charge. I think the New York Fed governor was in charge because he's running all the insider stock trading. He's running all the different primary dealer, bond aid. So what you're seeing is the removal of central banker officials, but not the top officials, so that the top officials don't have the support mechanism anymore. Now, remember I said that, what a guy like Macron might have 15 legs to stand on, but now only 5 or 6. Well, these central bank officials might have had a dozen legs to stand on. Now they only have a couple because many people have been removed. And look at how Trump has filled a number of Fed positions with pro-gold advocates and what they call hawks. Monetary hawk is someone who doesn't like easy money. So, even someone like Jerome Powell, who's kind of like a strange, powerless figurehead of the Fed right now, probably the weakest Fed official we've ever had. And that's saying a lot considering that Timothy Geithner is in that list. Timothy Geithner basically participated in a massive Indonesian fraud, and his reward was a 6-year appointment at the Treasury. I mean, it's just sick what we do.
Jim, do you think this is a coordinated effort? I mean, if you look at what Trump is doing, oh, you do? Do you think like Russia and China, are all these countries involved in doing this?
I think that a lot of support is being given by Russia and China for the cleanup that's going on. Remember I said that the Chinese triad is in charge of hits. And if a triad if a triad agent is going to do a hit in Belgium, he's got to watch out for, say, Vatican hitmen that might be onto him and look to eliminate the triad hitman. So you got hitman from the triad versus hitmen from the Vatican. Anyone who thinks the Vatican is a religious institution, you need to wake the hell up. They're a Satanist organization. They're a banker organization. And they've got a visible element called the College of Cardinals. And most of them are sexual deviants.
So
I don't want to say any more about
I understand what you're saying. But I just want to get this clear for me and everyone else. You said they're removing all the underlings, the officers, so the top people don't have any power.
Well, don't have support.
Don't have
They
support,
have power,
which
but they can't enforce what they want to do. Okay, I'll give you an example. You might have, say, Mario Draghi making a statement. We're going to do this, A, B, and C. And it involves the German banks, and the Germans push back. And Draghi realizes, I don't have the enforcement mechanism. I don't have the support I did 4 years ago. I can't do what I want. I'm going to have to let the Germans win. I need to make a new press statement where I fall back on my position and try to save face rather than giving a lot of credit to German power. That's how I think it works.
Well, eventually, do you think by removing the power and their support mechanism, is there eventual plan to go after the entire apparatus, the whole central bank system? Because what would be
and it's happening, Dave. Look at the insolvency and the growing balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. I mean, you got to go back to this Bank for International Settlement, Basel plan from the 1980 decade, that when the central banks are up to their gills in impaired bonds, they're going to need to work their way out of their insolvent situation. And they will do so by buying an enormous amount of gold and quietly engineer their purchases. And after they're done, then when all the central banks are loaded up on gold, they allow the gold price to go up tenfold. That's a Jelly, his name is Jelle, that's his first name, Zylstra, Zijlstra, Jelly Zylstra. Okay, Chairman Zylstra had that plan. And in the 2000 decade, 2000 to 2010, a guy named William White was the chief economist at Basel, and he endorsed the plan and said that it needs to begin implementation. He said that around 08 and 09, following the Lehman disaster. What we've got now is 5 times bigger than the Lehman disaster. Back then, it was the subprime mortgage bond and the big title database of MERS, which had multiple different bonds using the same secure stream from a mortgage, just tremendous rife fraud throughout. Now we've got the global subprime bond being the treasuries, and they're being dumped internationally. This is going to be 3 to 5 times bigger. So, okay, let's just stick with that, 3 to 5. Back then, Lehman fell, and Fannie Mae fell. So 2 failures, and I don't want to include AIG. AIG was murdered. To save Goldman Sachs, AIG was murdered. So 2 were killed and 2 died from the failures and 1 was murdered. Okay, so focus on that number 2. Now, this is going to be 3 to 5 times bigger. Therefore, I think 6 to 10 major sci-fi banks, systemically important financial institutions, 6 to 10 sci-fi banks are going to fail. I've identified 6 in big trouble: Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, and Society General. There's 6. Now, in order to make it all work, they might have to murder another financial firm.
And which
to accomplish what feat? I don't know. Okay. But with AIG, it was to redeem all the different credit default swaps that Goldman Sachs owned and redeem them at 100 cents on the dollar, which was a crime all by itself, because the next ones in line got 75 cents and the next ones in line got 30 to 40 cents. Goldman Sachs got 100 cents on the dollar because they killed AIG. And Hank Greenberg's been stuck in court and just can't get a whole lot of satisfaction because he doesn't have a lot of legs. He's got his own 2, maybe 1 or 2 more. Not enough. Not enough.
Is all this being set up for returning to the gold standard?
yes, it is. But, I like to be careful in letting people understand what the gold standard in this modern time is going to look like. I just read something. Well, no, I just got referred something that Martin Armstrong wrote. He wrote, the basic point was the gold standard just cannot be implemented in today's day and age. It just won't work. Well, I think what he's saying, I might be building a straw dog here because I honestly have not read. I like to be an honest broker of analysis and information. I have not read what he's written, but I have read several different analyses that make this point, and I suspect that Martin Armstrong is parallel to this. They say you just can't have a gold-backed currency because there's too much gold to truck around, and you can't have, overnight settlement with truck deliveries of gold, and bank-to-bank settlements cannot have all this movement of gold. It just can't work that way. You can't have a gold-backed currency. And to that I say, you got all this backwards. It's going to be a 3-step process, and I'm not certain the third step will work. The first is trade will be settled in gold. It will be done with gold trade notes. It will be done with gold put up as equity and the rest put up as credit. Think of it as a letter of credit with 5 or 10% down in gold. It will be handled bilaterally, 2 countries at a time. It'll be handled on a quarterly basis for settlement. In other words, they'll let it all roll and roll and roll. At the end of the quarter, 2 countries will get together and say, we need to handle the imbalance here and do it with a movement of gold by air or truck. And my guess is that when that comes, a third nation will come in and make a different agreement and make another bilateral, so it become trilateral, or the bilateral will become a different bilateral, and they will manage the gold trade payment system by means of bilateral quarterly settlement. And gold will be behind it. And that has already begun. China and Italy just had a gold trade note established as the foundation for bilateral trade between those 2 countries. Furthermore, a gold trade note backed up an Austrian government bond, a panda bond. So we're seeing the gold guarantee show up in form of gold trade note. And if they blow it, if they don't achieve equilibrium, they don't achieve, not parity, what's the word? Balance. They don't achieve balance, and there's a slight, it's not, a good balance of import-export, but instead a little mismatch. They're going to have to come up with the gold or get another country to invest gold in their place in order to conduct a second bilateral agreement. But the panda bond is interesting because it's a Chinese RMB denominated bond used by typically sovereign governments like Austria. There are going to be more and more and more of them because the Chinese investors loaded with savings will not have any currency risk. They won't care if the euro goes up a little bit or down a little bit versus the Chinese currency. They don't care because their investment is locked in the currency of China. The risk is borne by Austria. If they blow it and their currency goes down, if their economy goes to smithereens, they're going to have to forfeit gold. Okay, so you've got sovereign bonds. They're going to be backed up by gold trade notes. You've got trade between 2 nations that can be backed up by gold trade note. I didn't even mention currencies. So the straw dog that a lot of analysts put out there is that the gold standard can't come about because currency backed by gold is too impractical. I didn't talk about currency. I'm talking about gold being involved in trade settlement. Okay, imagine a country like Iran. By the way, they just had a big one, 50 billion barrel oil discovery in Iran.
Yep.
We haven't even talked about oil. Maybe the last piece we will. But if Iran sells a bunch of oil, one of their big partners is China, and they've been doing barter. So they get motorcycles, televisions, and various other finished products while the Chinese get raw crude oil. Okay, that's barter. But there might be some gold guarantees to that. Don't know. And the gold guarantee will be in the form of the gold trade note. I didn't mention currency. So the straw dog argument is kind of interesting Dave. And I don't buy it, and I don't let them run with it. I try to cut them off at the knees.
Now, what about the U.S.? You mentioned before that Trump was putting certain individuals on the Federal Reserve Board that believe in gold. How does the U.S. fit into this?
Not very well. Okay, let's just start off with one thing. The Belt and Road Initiative has 30, 40 countries in it and involved in it at the table. And $5 trillion, $6 trillion, $8 trillion in projects. I read a couple of months ago that through July, which is 7 months, they had $600 billion worth of trade. So they're on course of $1 trillion for the year, the full year, of finished, paid-for trade. None of it is in the dollar. Okay, where does the U.S. fit in? Absolutely not at all in the Belt and Road Initiative. Where does Britain fit in? Well, they're looking to worm their way into a position where they might be a lender of funds or a seller of some technology. I think they'll do both. Okay. The Americans are now realizing, at least some of the think tanks are beginning to conclude, the United States is not figuring into the new structure following reset, post-reset structure. We're not figuring into anything. That's right, because we're too busy waging war, and we're too busy with trade wars. We're too busy intimidating countries to continue with dollar trade. We're too busy intimidating countries to sell or not to sell their oil. And we're too busy blaming Russia for the coup that the U.S. and Israel executed in Ukraine. We're too busy doing criminal stuff. We're way too involved in war, fraud, and criminal deeds to be involved in the structural reconfiguration of the globe. Now, I focus on three things when it comes to the U.S., gold standard, finances, etc. We need to eliminate the trade deficit. We need to really radically bring down the fiscal deficit, and we need to return industry to the United States. Have we made any progress during the Trump administration or during the entire Obama administration?
Well, I believe we have made some with the Trump administration by placing tariffs on China. There are companies that are moving out of China, making it very difficult for them to move back into China. And Trump, again, he's been in office, 3 years? Trying to bring as many manufacturers back to the U.S. is not an easy task to accomplish in 3 years when the deep state, the central bankers, had how many years to move them out of the United States?
It's 20, 25.
But he has brought back some who've made promises that, yes, we're going to do business here. He has the USMCA, which, once again, Congress right now, they're too busy trying to impeach him, where they're not even looking at the USMCA because they have their own agenda. They really don't want to sign that. They don't want to pass that because that will add jobs, that will add trade, that will add many things that will look really bad for them, not for Trump and his administration. So there's been a little bit of progress. Yes. Enough? I don't think so as of yet.
Okay, so that's trade. On the fiscal side, there's been nothing but additional red ink.
True. Yes.
Okay. All right. So what you've done there is made a cogent argument at the micro level for bringing back some industry, which would aid in the form of reducing our trade deficit. But the bottom line on our trade deficit is that it's growing each year. So we're not succeeding. We might have some individual battles that are won, but the final wash is that we've got more red ink on our trade deficit, and it's now close to $900 billion. Okay, here's my major point. I don't think we have the gold. I don't think we have the industry. We've not gotten rid of our twin deficits of trade and fiscal. Therefore, if we locate the gold through lease or confiscation of elite or rescue of past hoards, like in Indonesia, then we lose it in the first 2 years. So we don't want to do that. We're not going to go on the gold standard for a new dollar because we'd lose all of our gold in the first 2 years. I like to mention some numbers because these are correct calculations. For a $1,300 gold price, our trade deficit is roughly 13,000 tons of gold. So at 1,500 gold price, we're dealing with something like 10 or 11,000 tons of gold, maybe a little bit more than that, because the trade deficit is going up each year. Therefore, okay, some say, well, Jim, you don't understand. The gold price could go up and eliminate that risk. I said, no, it doesn't. You could have a doubled gold price up to 2,500, then we lose 13,000 tons in 2 years. 2 years is not a whole lot different from 1 year. So what we really need to do is not just locate the gold to back our current new currency. We need to improve our industrial base, which we've done, I think, next to nothing. Look what we've done in the farm sector. The trade war has pretty much, I think, wrecked 30 to 40% of the farm sector. So we've got less in the way of farm deals, ag deals, and not much to show in exports. And Argentina and Russia have taken the Chinese business away from our farm sector. That's not a success. I was telling a friend of mine a couple of days ago on my couch, I said, who do you think wins in a U.S.-China trade war? And she said, I think China wins. And I said, no, they just lose less. We both lose. It's a matter of who lost less. No one wins a trade war. And where are the economic historians to point out that no one wins a trade war? Yet we embark on a trade war, ooh, and we're tough and we're powerful and we're going to win this. Ooh, I don't buy any of this shit. We lost the trade war and so did China.
I don't think it's about winning. I think it's about evening out the playing field. I think what the central bank, the deep state, and the rest, what they've been doing is they've been making these lopsided trade deals throughout many, many years. And the U.S. has always been on the losing side. China was on the winning side. Europe was on the winning side. All these other countries were on the winning side. And once the petrodollar system disappears and these countries aren't holding the reserve currency anymore, we need to have an even playing field on trade. And I think that's really what it's about.
Well, it is. But I think it's incumbent upon the rational thinker and the perceptually aware to take a look at that warehouse and that series of stores and take a close look at what it resembles after 150 grenades are thrown at it. You've got a level field. It's destroyed. It's level field. That's what the trade war has done. It's eradicated numerous little pockets of our industrial sector. And, The Voice made a comment a few weeks ago. He said, Trump has done a good job. What he's doing is he's trying to bring about a controlled demolition so that we can have the reset and build upon a nice level playing field. And I said to him, well, yeah, but it's like, a warehouse and a series of stores just got completely destroyed. They don't have any workers anymore. They're on welfare. The workers are on welfare. And where's the big benefit? And he said, you've got a good basis now to grow. And all I could think of was, okay, I want to have a vegetable garden. I got to pick out, 30, 40 different weeds, and we're going to turn the soil over and mash it in. And that's our nice level field for a vegetable garden. That's what's going on, Dave. We don't have constructive building. We have destructive leveling. And I look at I'm more of a macro than I am a microeconomist. I look at what is the trade deficit. It's worse. What is the fiscal deficit? Well, we added more funds to the banks. We added more funds to the Pentagon. We added more funds secretly for all the immigrants that most people don't want. They're unvetted, untrained, don't assimilate. I got a story of a West Virginia big apartment complex that a client sent me photos of. He said, this is now 100% Muslim occupied. None of them have a job. Okay, so we've got fiscal deficits. We're approaching a fiscal crisis. We don't have the gold located. Even if we did, the trade deficit would wipe it out. What are we going to do? Does Trump have a plan for putting in robot technology, artificial intelligence, fiber optics, next generation energy production that's going to eliminate our trade deficit? That's going to take 10 years. What are we going to do in the next 8? I don't buy this leveling in order to this is not a vegetable garden. There are people that get overturned in that vegetable garden, and their children become food for the worms to fertilize the carrots that come.
Well, I mean, the system that we're in today is a central bank system. Look what they did in 2008. They bailed out all the companies. They saved these bankrupt systems. We really didn't go into a full recession, depression to start over, because how do you get out of a system that could never grow or help or benefit the people? The only way to do it is to get rid of it. The only way to do it is to restructure everything. And the way it is today, remember, everything that you know, everything that you've learned, everything that we understand is what the central bankers have been telling us.
I agree.
We live on debt. We need a credit
our money
card.
is based on debt,
Yes,
and our
everything is based on
universities
debt.
are preaching debt.
Yes. So
I remember when I was getting out of graduate school, I heard the nonsense, you're as wealthy as the credit you can obtain. Oh, really? Well, you ever have to pay it back? Well, apparently if you're an elite, no. And if you're a common guy, you go into bankruptcy or you get foreclosed and you lose your home. It's upside down. It's like having, a church built upon an entire field of rape and sexual molestation. Oh, that's what the Vatican is. Oh my gosh. It's everywhere. We have everything that's upside down.
No, and I think everything needs to be restarted. And yes, there's going to be certain places where it's not going to be that great in the beginning. And there's going to be certain businesses that aren't going to be that great in the beginning. But to start over, sometimes you have to really go through this. Isn't that what a depression is? Isn't that what a recession, a resetting of everything so the good can come?
A recession ideally would trim the weak branches off a tree so that the tree can grow during the next spring and summer. That's not what we have.
No, what we have now.
Our recession is to keep alive these hollow reed trees where powerful offices are located. And it's not to make anything healthy. It's to retain the power structure. So what I think is coming, and this scares the hell out of me, we're going to level the field, make it more conducive to a fair and just financial structure and economic system that's more balanced. But at risk are 50 million American lives.
I think there's a plan to help with this. I don't think they're just going to let this go. What?
A debt jubilee? It could be.
I mean, if they're removing certain individuals within the central bank, and Trump wants to put certain individuals who believe in gold, I believe the inner workings that there is something else that they're planning for. Why go through all the trouble then? Why go through all the hassle of being in office where they're trying to impeach you? What's the whole purpose? It's just for 4 years? It's for 8 years? It makes no sense. That's not what it's about.
I think it's a 20-year plan.
Well, yeah, you're going up against the establishment. You're going up against everyone that hates you. You're going up against everyone that would like you removed. It's not about 4 years. It's not about 8 years. It's much bigger than that. And I think that is the entire plan. It's much, much bigger than I think we even can comprehend, because I do believe that we're stuck in this dead central bank system, which should have imploded a long time ago, but they kept it going with quantitative easing and cutting the rates and all this stuff and what we see today. And I think eventually the outcome is going to be, okay, we need to start over. We need to get rid of that, because if we still have this, if we still have the central bank and we stay with the central bank, we're just repeating everything. We haven't solved anything.
We do. Well, that's what the Western bankers do all the time. We repeated all the errors of the subprime bond, but we did so in the sovereign bonds, not just the U.S. Treasury, but Euro bonds and maybe even UK gilts. What's backing up a UK gilt? Are they printing more of them to satisfy their banker obligations? Nothing seems to work. In what we've done since 2008 is to wash, rinse, and repeat on a bigger scale. We didn't fix anything.
No, we haven't. And that has been with the same exact people. I do believe now we have something completely different. That's why they're trying to stop him. That's why they're pushing so hard. Because if he was part of the same group, they wouldn't care. They wouldn't push all of this. They wouldn't try to get rid of him.
That.
Yeah.
I realize that.
And I think his next step, I think when he gets elected in 2020, his next step is to go after the central bank. Actually, he tweeted out that we need to audit the central bank. How many presidents?
Well, we need to audit the Pentagon too, but
I think we need to audit a lot. I think a lot has to be done. But how many presidents do you know that continually tell you that China isn't the problem? The Federal Reserve is the main problem. Did Obama do that? Did Bush
Obama
do that?
didn't do anything constructive.
It's not like just once. He
fined people for not being on Obamacare, but we give away insurance to unvetted immigrants. Now, try to figure that out.
No, I can't figure that out.
I can't. I don't even want to try. I think Obama was probably the biggest joke we've ever had in the White House. He was more of a joke than Baby Bush, who was the biggest imbecile in the White House.
Yeah, I think they're all part of the same group.
Well, I agree. It's left-wing globalists or right-wing globalists, and they're just wings on the same body, the globalists. And I agree that Trump is trying to rip them out of their powerful seats and posts, but I don't think wrecking a lot of the economy is the way to go, because our deficits are even bigger, and I don't have any information on rescued gold. We're not seeing any. Okay, one of the biggest problems about reindustrializing America, there are two major, big problems. We need to reindustrialize the United States, but we don't have an adequately trained worker base, and we don't have the capital. How are we going to do it?
It's easy.
You could talk about a level field and make it, more equitable. Who's going to start a smelter company that makes galvanized zinc tubing?
You use the central bank funds. You pass an infrastructure bill that is in trillions and trillions of dollars.
Okay, right? with gold as the basis.
Just use the central bank, just like they're doing today. He wants.
No, you can't have funny money doing this.
Well, yeah, you rebuild America.
You need a basis of real money. I think I agree with you. If your basis is a huge gold hoard that has like 10-to-1 monetization of the gold, and it's spread out to do business creation, plant and equipment, business investment, training, worker training. That's what we need. But I'm not sure we have the adequate worker base. Maybe someday we'll have the formula for the capital flow that you're describing. This is tough. We're getting dumber as a society, less trained, more coddled. I get stories all over the place from my clients who say, Jim, I'm in Michigan or I'm in Ohio. I can't find adequate workers. So many of them are on drugs or on welfare, and they don't want to get off.
Yeah, this was all done on purpose by the deep state, by those in power to dumb us down, because actually what their plan was to bring the United States down to a third world level. That was their plan.
To bring their wage structure back in line with what's equitable across the board in the world. So the United States can compete with Mexico. So they can compete with Ecuador. So they can compete with Serbia. Vietnam. Okay, But in the process, Dave, we're going to have a lot of lives put on the line. And the reason is it's just too difficult to have reform. In order to have reform, you need to overturn the entire garden so that you're not looking at nothing green.
I think it has to be done. I think it has to be done. I think all of this has to be done to get out of this central bank system. Actually, if you have an audit, and if we enter a crisis of some sort and we do have an audit and their bill, then because you always need a crisis to push a bill, and if you push an audit bill and it's signed by the president, you can then show that the central bank was dealing in criminal activity, which was not a benefit for the people, which brings in other things.
So what?
Which means what are you
going to do? Put them in jail? You probably won't even be able to find them or know what country they have
the
passports
debt is null
for.
and void because it was not part of their mandate.
Well, yeah, I don't think you can chase down these people or charge the central bank with crime. It just won't matter. You can't follow it up. what I'm hearing, what I'm expecting is that the U.S. government is going to take control of the Federal Reserve. In fact, they probably already have because their contract expired. And a different criminal class will take control, and that is the Wall Street bankers who control the Treasury Department. Why do you think the Treasury Department was overwhelmed by Wall Street following Lehman Brothers? Because they saw this coming. They wanted to make all the rules. They wrote the entire Dodd-Frank financial bill. They wrote the whole thing. Citigroup wrote it.
I think that was their plan. I think their plan is no longer viable. I think their plan is going to be thrown out the window, just like a lot of other things that were being thrown out the window. I think
it could be.
Their plan was to have Hillary Clinton as president.
Which one?
Which one?
I've got a picture of side by side two Hillarys that I posted 2 years ago. One was the 70 or 72-year-old hag in August, and the other one was the October version who looked 25 years younger. So whenever Hillary's name comes up, I ask, which Hillary are you referring to?
Maybe both.
Because I think they could pass as mother and daughter.
Yeah.
There's that much of an age difference. And the younger one looks about 50, 52, 53, and is running around. And I wonder what happened to the hag. The hag was 70 and big, wrinkled, bags under her eyes, and couldn't handle all the exertion from the campaign trail. So she gave way to the younger version for the CNN debate. This is laughable.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, I think their plan is not going the way they thought it was going to go.
No,
and
they lost their middle level.
Yeah,
90% that flipped, were stripped, or killed.
Yeah, Jim, let's go ahead.
No, it's going to be very interesting and very exciting. And what I'm looking primarily at is, when are we going to begin the industrialization? How are we going to do it? When are we going to identify our gold? How are we going to explain a new dollar that's going to be gold backed? Otherwise, we will not be able to compete, and we will not see import supply into the United States. So what I'm thinking we're going to do is to have a new Scheiss dollar. Scheiss is German for shit. A new Scheiss dollar with a fake gold backing and lots of intimidation not to deliver the gold for settlement, bilateral, quarterly, or whatever. We're going to have a fake dollar backed by gold.
We'll have to say. Jim, I want to thank you for coming on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see all your work and get in touch with you?
The website has a hyphen in it. Ever since January. It's www.golden-jackass.com. Has a new website manager who's done a tremendous job. He's from Western Europe. He's a professional. Let me just describe very little. He's a marketing expert. He's a search engine expert. He's a web design expert. He's an expert about 5 different things. Very crafted guy. And he designed the website for me free and said, I'll take charge of it if you want. And I said, I like the wider format. I like the compatibility with the handheld portable devices. And he gave me a lot of information. He populated the website all of last year. So when we got to January, we had 12 reports already loaded. January made 13, and we're up and running. A lot of compliments. It's a WordPress production. And he's a good guy. He's a smart guy. He's my buddy, and I always wish him well. He actually lives in a socialist state, so he gives me a little bit of information on the over 50% tax rate. Over 50% tax rate, and the enormous welfare state that don't ever want to get off. So interesting, but. It's www.golden-jackass.com, and I include a lot of public articles and public interviews. I try to get almost all the interviews linked and shown on the website. But this is clearly a paid website service, and for sale is the Hetrick letter. Ever since January, it's been a single report, the Global Gold Reset Report. Forget it. It's just the Hetrick letter report. it's focused on gold, it's focused on the dollar, focused on oil, and all the changes and all the resets and all the havoc that's going on. And last month there was a great emphasis on the bond market and the damage that's been done and is continuing. There was a lot of information on the infinite QE that I think is taking root now. It's not something, well, we might get, no, we're getting it now. It might not in the future. It's now. It's getting rooted now. But it's a hat trick letter. It's 6-month subscriptions. And golly, just a little background. It's 75% U.S. base, about 13% Canadian base, and the rest is split between Europe, Asia, and Australia, and just a scattering in the Middle East and Latin America, just a scattering, like 10 or 15 from the entire Gulf region. But gosh, it's amazing. It's quite a huge contingency from Germany, Switzerland, England, and Australia. Huge contingency. They're English speaking. Many Americans don't realize that 90% of Germans speak English. Primarily the West Germans speak English. East Germans, not much. But there's also a button. There's a subscribe button, but there's also a button to donate. I've come to learn, and this is from messages from several dozen followers. They say pretty much the same thing. Been following your work for a few years. I've never subscribed. I listened to your interviews. They're all very good. And I never paid for a newsletter, so I'm kind of glad for the opportunity to help you out during a time of need with the donate button. So I'm grateful to them. One was a guy in the Netherlands, and he said, I've got 3 kids, and I was out of work a few years ago, and now I'm doing okay. And over the weekend, I'll make a contribution to your donate button because I don't have time with my family and my job to read the newsletter, but I do have time to listen to your YouTubes, your interviews, and they're great. They're very informative. They're educational. Wow, $250 from a guy in Netherlands who never was a subscriber. It's just very heartwarming what's going on. And there are dozens and dozens, if not 100, that are, donations under $40 or $50, and they all add up, and they're tremendous. I got a few large donors, and I try to make direct contact with them. I'm talking about very large, 4 figures or more, and I need more of them. I'm working out of a hole here, and I'm beginning to see the light, and I'm starting to see how I can be able very soon to pay off the rest of my debts that came about from fraud, faulty construction, car crashes, and medical. It's really sad, but I hope people go to the website. There've been a lot of compliments on how it looks, the graphic detail and quality. For instance, we make a selection, or I do. What's the graph for this month? And last month, October, I said, we've got to use the repo graph. And what was the graph for September? And I can't remember. I don't remember exactly what it was. But it's something specifically that is like an emblem for the month, a symbol for the month. And, that's a nice little feature that my guy thought up. And I really like the look and feel of it. It's a wider format. And, he's got his own job. And he said, well, I'll take care of that tonight, Jim, when I get back from work. And, we're 8 hours different. And he said, I'll take care of that this weekend. I'm working on my garden. And, I'm doing other things. And he's just a very interesting, colorful fellow. He's got his own challenges that he's dealing with. And so that's how you get in touch with the website, golden-jackass.com. Sign up for the newsletter. I like to mention some of the nicest compliments I get. One is, I never sign up for the newsletter because I listen to free reports and free interviews, but I finally signed up a year and a half ago. Wow, what a mistake. I should have signed up 4 years ago. Big mistake, because I missed a lot. You go into a lot of detail and you tie things together well. Okay, another compliment I got was, I still get, is I backed out of your newsletter. I was on from, say, 2011 to 2016, 5 years, and then I got off, but now I'm back. I wish I never left. There are a couple other compliments that are very nice and heartwarming. And, this is a mission. This is a difficult job. And I believe that I've been targeted by some demonic forces. I know some people They don't think in terms like that. But when I experienced troubles, Dave, they started in March 2 years ago, exactly when I started talking about the pedophiles and the ritual killings with some descriptions. It was an explosion of problems. So I decided in late 2018, I'm not going to talk about the pedophiles, their pizza and hot dogs and Podesta and their rituals and their somber music and their low frequency vibes. And I'm not going to tell the story. Let somebody else, because I put myself on the line and I got one leg cut off. And I'm trying to make it for the rest of my life after some very serious wounds. And I've gotten help. There have been 45 people who've helped me in a significant way. And there have been a few hundred, several hundred who've helped overall. I'm still not in great shape. I could tell more, like waking up at 4 a.m, worried, sick, stuff like that. But I just read a very interesting analysis, kind of like a future glimpse. And it said that, people's bank accounts, people's business bank accounts, people's mutual funds, maybe not so much, but paymaster system. Oh, no, not mutual fund. Get that out. That's stock. Paymaster systems, like with the newsletter, scheduled payments every 6 months, with ATM machines and with bank wire systems for transfers and with other alternative systems for transfers, referring implicitly to crypto and other things like, MoneyGram, Western Union. Those are all going to continue, and those are all going to be healthy, and they're all going to be strong and viable because they serve the masses. I don't want to say the vassals and the serfs, but they serve the common man. They serve the street level people who work for a living and struggle with families and small businesses and whatever. The trouble is going to come for the owners and operators and the fraud kings of the major platforms. That's where the trouble is going to come.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for this tilling that you described, Dave. I'm looking for it.
I think it's coming.
It's coming. It's going to be interesting, but I think a lot of lives are at risk.
Yeah. Jim, thank you very much for being on the spotlight. I'm going to be putting all the links at the bottom of this video, so it makes it easier for people to click right over to your site. Once again, thank you very much for being on the spotlight. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's great to be on your show, one of my favorite shows of all. And this time we actually got into a small debate, which was constructive, and I enjoyed it.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye now.
Hands up.